Crossed into the net by Kylian Mbappe.
Oh, Benyera, beautifully done.
Cornet finds Dembele. The first touch is good. The second is deadly.
Neymar still. Oh my word, what a goal.
Golovin. Lovely finish. Voyage delivery. Gendouzi's header.
Here's an opportunity. Sanchez.
Outrageous goal from Gael Kakuta. Play it again. And Dolberg. Messi again. This time maybe Messi's done it.
Hello and welcome to Le Beau Jeu. It's the official Ligue podcast in English. Coming up on today's show, we take a look at how injury hit Paris Saint-Germain came unstuck again against bogey side Rennes. Alexis Sanchez doubles up to end Will Still's unbeaten start to life as coach at Reims. Lens confirmed their return to form. More heroics from Loïs. 5 goals and 1 assist in 2 matches Openda, while Monaco had Big Cheddar Wissam Yedder. That just doesn't that just rhyme delightfully? On target in their 2-0 derby kind of win against Ajaccio. Les Dogues as well, keeping up the momentum. Lille beating Toulouse in a wet and windy Rose City. There's also Deja Who and Bon Voyage. So join us and explore the jungle of French football with the official Ligue 1 podcast in English, Le Beau Jeu. Got 2 fine colleagues with me today, Jérémy Magan and Andy Scott, but there is only one place to start, and I think that despite the influence I have, Vladimir Schmitz's appearance at UEFA HQ for Friday's European draws was entirely coincidental and not at all linked to last week's pod anecdote. An anecdote which I have to say created an unhealthy, jealous reaction from many, many of my colleagues. One of them wasn't Callum Brown. Callum was at the Parc des Princes as Paris Saint-Germain took on Rennes. Rennes, who had already beaten the QSI version of PSG. Lots of acronyms in there. 3 times in their previous 6 encounters.
It's Verratti's ball. It's just that touch. Half. But here is Mbappe in behind. Kylian Mbappe drags one wide. Verratti's ball. A great run this time from the captain. Took one touch. It's on the left foot. Manzanza leaves it. Was certain it was going behind. Back to Messi. Mbappe's made the run. He's been picked out by Messi. Kylian Mbappe bearing down on goal. Good stop from Manzanza again. Great pass from the Argentinian. The stars of the most recent World Cup final combine. Good stop from Manzanza though. Mbappe still in search. Beau Jeu over the top looking for Toko Ekambi. Carl Toko Ekambi puts Rennes in front. Right on the stroke of half-time. They have been fantastic in this first half. What a ball from Beau Jeu. Toko Ekambi. Not a bad way to get your first Rennes goal. Here comes Ugachukwu. Rennes break forward. Leslie Ugachukwu, Kalimwendo, it's 2. This is incredible. He doesn't celebrate the former Paris Saint-Germain player, but he has his side. 2 goals in front. This is unbelievable. Juan Bernat gives the ball away. And PSG have done the complete opposite. Ugachukwu's ball across. Kalimwendo comes back to bite his former side. Paris Saint-Germain 0, Rennes 2. Here's Toko Ekambi. Carl Toko Ekambi. Paris Saint-Germain, masters of their own downfall once more. This ball for Marco Verratti. What a save yet again. Steve Manzanza. Mbappe for Ekitike. Much better this from the hosts. But Rennes have got so many bodies behind the ball. Difficult to break down.
Well, chaps, they've only gone and done it again. Pep Genesio, I'm not sure if it's the tactics actually that did for PSG, but it was again a youth academy player from PSG's ranks. Arnaud Kalimuendo didn't come through really in the first team. 5 first-team appearances? I think even in the Trophée des Champions earlier this season. Headed off to Rennes. He got one of the goals. Karl Toko Ekambi just before half-time as well. Rennes beating PSG, but the story really is Rennes beating PSG again. And Christophe Galtier, after the Champions League exit, well, does he even stay till the end of the season? Andy Scott.
Good morning, Ian. Yeah, I think to answer your question, yes, I think he stays till the end of the season. I think he will see the league title over the line. This has been a fairly regular occurrence for PSG in recent years. I mean, we know it's the 5th time in 7 seasons in which they've gone out of the Champions League in the last 16, and there's been quite a few occasions in the last few years when there's been a tail-off in terms of results, in terms of performances. Clearly, you know, there's an issue of motivation at this point when they've been knocked out of Europe. So a year ago, they suffered a heavy defeat in Monaco on the back of being knocked out of the Champions League by Real Madrid. I remember when Thomas Tuchel was in charge. It was 2019 after the Manchester United exit when the results went off a cliff. They were heavily beaten by Lille. They lost in Nantes. You know, there are a few bad results, but they still won the title. I mean, now they're still 7 points ahead, and I fully expect PSG to win the title with, you know, at least 2 or 3 games to spare. You mentioned that they've got a bit of a poor record against Rennes. I mean, in relative terms, yeah, I mean, compared to pretty much everybody else in Ligue, in the QSI era, they've struggled against Rennes. It's the 4th time Rennes have been to the Parc des Princes and won in the last decade and a bit more. Obviously, they beat them at home earlier this season. So they seem to have the Indian sign over them. It was a poor performance from PSG yesterday. It is an issue. There are problems. I don't like hearing any coach of Paris Saint-Germain complain about injuries and about essentially not being able to field a competitive team, because at the end of the day, when you have the budget that Paris Saint-Germain have compared to everybody else, you should be able to cope with even losing 6 or 7 players due to injury. But it's an indication of what has been a poorly constructed squad, I have to say. And I think we see that with, you mentioned Arnaud Kalimuendo. I'm going to be honest, my increasingly wild eyebrows were raised out of curiosity last summer when I saw that Kalimuendo had been sold and that they brought in Hugo Ekitike. I've mentioned this several times on the podcast before. The Ekitike thing I never really quite understood, both from a Reims perspective and a PSG perspective. But to let Kalimuendo go just to bring in Ekitike seemed a slightly strange one. I mean, Kalimuendo is a very different type of attacking player to Ekitike. You don't have to sort of change the way you play if you're Paris Saint-Germain to fit Kalimuendo into the team. He could kind of slot into that team. He's a very mobile, quick, you know, sort of low centre of gravity attacking player, whereas Ekitike is a very different type of striker. They could have kept him, and they would have had something different, you know, in attack at the moment with Neymar not being there. But he's gone to Rennes and he's helped Rennes get the victory. And these things tend to happen to PSG, right? The old boys scoring against them. So there are lots of things to talk about there. And I think, you know, to have the focus now on Christophe Galtier is probably not quite the right moment. I think he will see out the season. And I think that is a discussion which will be valid another day. I know he was asked about it in his post-match press conference yesterday. And he said, well, perhaps the board of directors, as it were, will be thinking about my future. But I think at this moment in time, I don't think there's any question he will see out the season. Whether he's still there next season is a different question.
Andy, you've got a really good point when you look at the back 3 yesterday. Juan Bernat, left back, left wing back, starts as the right-sided centre back. that was Juan Bernat. Okay, Danilo Pereira was probably the most experienced centre back of the lot. He's a midfielder. And on the left side, 17-year-old, undoubtedly huge potential, huge teenager, El Shaddai Bichabou. But, I mean, yes, they've got Marquinhos out. Yes, they've got Ramos out. Mukiele's got problems as well. Kimpembe's out for the rest of the season. They've lost a lot of players in the same position. Jérémy, do you not have a little bit of sympathy for Galtier?
You have to have a bit of sympathy when those players are injured, but I think like Andy was saying, with the budget that PSG has, You just have to make sure your team is built to avoid all this. And when Galtier says things like all those academy players basically don't know what's going on, it's also him saying that he doesn't know what he's doing in his own team and he's not preparing young players to be able to stand up. I think all season we've seen that also Galtier has sort of not been able to keep one tactic straight. It was 3 defender, 4 defender, 3 defender, and now that doesn't have enough defenders, he decides to play with a back 3 when maybe it would have made more sense to keep players in their position. To have a back 4, at least you would have a real left back and a real right back if you put Pembele down. So I guess I'm a bit at a loss with what Galtier does and also with his post-game press conference. He doesn't help himself. Sure, all those injuries are hard, but with the talent that there is in that PSG team, playing at home against Rennes shouldn't be an issue when Rennes is not even playing that well yesterday, or sorry, over the weekend and in the last few weeks. So, you can feel for him as far as the injuries. I also think that he's just reaping what he's been sowing all season. You had Neymar and you play with 3 forward. You don't have Neymar and then you change your tactic and at the back you're not doing it when you're using your players. I'm just having a real issue following what he's trying to do, and everybody has said that. I think all season, he's guiding a lot of guidelines or I guess direct orders from around him, and at the end he looks to me as lost as Tuchel was at the end of his adventure at Paris Saint-Germain, and it's sad because it's only just past halfway through his first season.
Yeah, for me, you have to just wonder where do PSG go after this? They've tried the Ancelottis, they've tried the Tuchels, they've now tried. I think that we can agree the best French coach of probably the last decade. Where do you go now? And do other people at the club need to start looking and saying, right, okay, we need to perhaps think about the direction that we've been going in. I mean, I think there was a bit of a sea change last summer, wasn't there? And they're trying to make this more of a Parisian club, more of a French club. But I mean, we talked about strength and depth of the Paris squad quite a lot. But if you have a look at the bench yesterday, it's not so much even the first team. If you look at the bench yesterday, there are some names on there that I don't even recognise. Nehemiah Fernandez? Is that it? I mean, they had 2 goalkeepers. Were they going to bring Alexandre Letellier on up front in case Mbappe got injured? I mean, they were filling out. They were like just literally filling out the bench. Probably I could have. I was pretty close to the Parc des Princes yesterday. If I'd been and got there early enough, I might have got on the bench. I mean, it's almost not quite getting to that point, fortunately for PSG, but even so, and when you think about a club of that stature, they shouldn't be Okay, it's a bit unfair on those kids who are on the bench, but it's kind of scraping. Looking around, like stuffing the hand down the back of the sofa for a youth academy player so that we can just whack him on the bench so that we've actually got the numbers. I mean, we're talking about a pretty drastic situation. Yes, they've got a lot of players who've been out, but when you add that to the Mbappe contract situation, the Messi contract situation, dare I say the Neymar contract situation, which has already been sorted out, but which is taking up a lot of money and is going to take up a lot of money for the next 2-3 years. There's a major it sounds strange, they lead the table by 7 points, but there's a major rebuilding, a reconstruction, or maybe just even a deconstruction and a reconstruction period to go through at PSG, isn't there, Andy?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I suppose when Christophe Galtier said yesterday that he was brought here for a 2-year project. And when Kylian Mbappe, has indicated as well after the defeat against Bayern that this is kind of where we're at the moment, all of it points to them suggesting that PSG are actually in a period of transition. The thing that bugs me about it, that would imply that maybe next season they will be stronger. That's the idea. They're slowly building up to be where they want to be again. But the thing that really bugs me about this is, and we're talking about the Lionel Messi contract situation. The suggestion now that PSG are thinking, well, maybe actually we don't really want to extend his contract, which I tend to think might be the wise way of looking at it. I mean, the issue I have is that, of course, if you throw so much money at Kylian Mbappe and Lionel Messi, and you're aware that financial fair play is an issue, that you have to at least, try to to respect financial fair play rules, then I suppose the question is, if you're Mbappe and you're thinking, I want to play, I want to have a good team around me, then maybe there has to be somewhere along the line you say, well, clearly I can't have all the money because that's hobbling the team, the club from signing the players, whether it be an issue of depth, or whether it be an issue of signing more high-level quality players and bigger wages. If you're throwing all the money at one or two or three players, obviously that is a problem. So, I'm not suggesting that Kylian Mbappe needs to turn around and say, okay, I'm not going to take, 50 million euros. You can have that for the wages of 10 other players. But there is obviously a question of serious imbalance within the squad. I tend to agree with you. I think there needs to be a clearing of the decks, pretty much. I think they're in that kind of a situation, and I think we're already at the point now we think about, how much longer do we persist with players like Verratti and Marquinhos who've been there for a decade. I know this sounds a little bit extreme because they've lost the game against Rennes, but I think your point about who would be the next coach, where Christophe Galtier to leave, is an interesting one, because while I think any coach, if he's approached by a club like Paris Saint-Germain, would find it hard to refuse, you look at Galtier and you think, well, in a way, what's he supposed to have done? I mean, his team are 7 points clear at the top of the table despite that defeat yesterday. They're well on course to win the league. You can lose a Champions League tie against Bayern Munich. I suppose the one thing I would say, and similarly a cup tie away to Marseille, that might happen. But I suppose the one thing I would say is that they didn't win the Champions League group because they didn't seem to realise the importance of scoring goals at the end of the game against Juventus in the final match day. Benfica rattled in the goals because they seemed to be aware that the group might be decided on who'd scored the most goals away from home. Benfica have since gone on to beat Club Brugge, the weakest side in the knockout stages of the Champions League, and they're now in certainly the favourable side of the draw in the quarterfinal. So that could have been PSG. So that's one thing you could hold against them. But otherwise, it's difficult to say, you have to beat Bayern Munich. You can lose to Bayern Munich. And this can happen to any PSG coach, that by early March, you're out of the Champions League, you're miles clear at the top of the league, and it seems that there's no point in the rest of the season. So I've got some sympathy for him from that point of view. In a way, what else is he supposed to do? And I think it's kind of an existential problem, and it's a discussion I'd like to get into another day, but not right now. The issue is redistribution of wealth in leagues in general. In other words, there needs to be more possibilities for other clubs to compete with Paris Saint-Germain to make it a proper title race. So we're not sitting here saying, how it must be so hard for them to motivate themselves. But that's a discussion for another time, and possibly even, another platform. Right now, PSG have got a league to win, and I'm sure they're going to go on and win it despite all these injury problems.
You're listening to Andrew Karl Marx Scott's on Le Beau Jeu, the official Ligue 1 Uber Eats podcast in English. Let's just move on a little bit now. Speaking of expectations, and here's a segue. Christophe Galtier, when he took his Saint-Etienne team to Toulouse for a winter training camp, I think before they were going to play Manchester United in the Europa League, he would have expected pretty decent weather even in February. I went there to interview Florentin Pogba, who was one of his players at the time, and it was snowing in Toulouse. Lille probably would have been hoping for a pretty decent little weekend as well, maybe a short break after the game when they went to the southwest, but it was wet and windy at the stadium. Still, Lille taking the win. Alexandro bagging his third of the season, and Mohamed Bayo, like this one, gets the latest ever Ligue 1 Uber Eats goal, 90 plus 11. How many people left the stadium before that one? I'm not sure how many people were in the Stade François Coty at Ajaccio, which is one of the more picturesque stadia in European football, it has to be said, at least the surroundings. Wissam Ben Yedder moving on to 17 goals. Crépin Diatta as well, getting on the score sheet as Monaco get their first win in 4. That was a big one for Philippe Clement's side. Really had to win that one against an Ajaccio side in deep trouble. They're in even deeper trouble now. The Corsicans slumping down to 19th. Slightly out of trouble are Strasbourg. They had a big game as well at the weekend against a fellow struggling side, Auxerre. Auxerre in the relegation spots. Strasbourg now courtesy of a 2-0 win, 3 points clear. Jezino Niamsi with a pretty decent strike on that one. Habib Diallo as well on target too. And it's time for my weekly rant about how many Ligue 1 teams should have really bought Habib Diallo when he was going to leave Metz and not allowed him to go to Strasbourg. Well, Alexis Sanchez, gentlemen, evergreen is the Chile international. Has to be said that when he came into Marseille in the summer, plenty of scepticism, notably on this podcast. Well, he's pretty much silenced everybody right now. He was the hero for Marseille at Reims on Sunday evening, and I have to say it was a fabulous bit of commentary by, I don't know, a young and aspiring commentator.
Away by De Smet. And now Reims could break, and they've set Balogun free. Red and white shirt streaming forward. Following Balogun. Saved by Lopez. Because Munetzi pulls it back, an opportunity. And Balogun does it again. And Reims are ahead. Got away from Veretout. It dragged Gigot out of the middle. And there was all sorts of space for Balogun, who was calling for the ball. Actually mishit it, did Balogun, but maybe that's how it ended up going into the goal, because it went over the outstretched leg of Rongier. But that's the luck that you get when you've already scored 16 goals in the season. And surely he cannot have dreamed of this. Will still his side lead, a 0-0 against Marseille. But here goes Cengiz Under, fouled. Surely they're going to have a yellow card. Surely not a red. The Marseille, yes indeed, there were two players, says Mr. Letexier. Thibaut De Smet, I think, is the man who made the foul. Alexis Sanchez, still sporting that 1940s RAF commander moustache. Sanchez with the free kick. It's a good one. It's a very, very good one. And Marseille are level. In off the post. And Diouf had no chance. In off the post. Alexis Sanchez, number 11 for the season for him. It was a penalty last week. It's a free kick this week. Oh, Alexis Sanchez in behind here. And Reims are punished. They fell asleep. And Alexis Sanchez has his second of the game. And it's another assist for Paul Lopez. He's making a real habit of it. It's the Marseille goalkeeper. It's his third assist of his career. The second this season. You can see Sanchez wanted it. Played into space. Abdelhamid is ball watching. He doesn't see Sanchez go around the blind side. And Alexis Sanchez was not going to miss that. 12 for the season in Ligue 1 for the Chilean. Marseille lead 2-1. It's across again, deep. Munetzi is there, and a chance, surely! And he's put it wide. Of all the people, following Balogun, falls to the ground, his head in his hands. Clipped the outside of the post. What an opportunity. You would have bet more than your house on him scoring. If so, you'd be homeless.
Yes, well, I'm sure that commentator will go really, really far. He may end up presenting an official Ligue 1 Uber Eats podcast in English one day. But Alexis Sanchez, he may well have a decent career as well. At, 34 now? Brilliant free kick to equalise after the inevitable following Balogun had got on the score sheet for Reims. And then a second assist of the season. Maybe this is PSG's reason for picking two goalkeepers on the bench. Paul Lopez got a second assist of the season, the Marseille goalkeeper. His clearance clearly meant split the two centre-backs. Abdelhamid and Sheikh Keita looking at each other. Sanchez nipped in behind, 2-1 with half an hour gone. And Will Still's unbeaten start to life as a top coach comes to an end. But Jérémy, Alexis Sanchez, let's be honest, no one thought he was going to be on double figures in terms of goals. No, he got 5 last season for Inter Milan. He's on 12 already this season. He's led the line basically on his own, certainly through the middle. I mean, he's just reborn. What's going on there?
Yeah, he is reborn indeed. I don't know if it's the warmth of the Stade Vélodrome, of or the chaos around the club that maybe reminds him of his native Chile. But it's when you see what he's done at Man United and Inter, there was definitely not a lot of expectations when he joined Marseille, and he's really showed up. Even when he was great at Arsenal, there was word of his behavior in the locker room not being great. So we know how that can go in Marseille. But he has been I think spectacular all season, and he's been a real leader as far as his fighting spirit and his mindset. I mean, you see him still tracking back and defending and chasing all the way to the end of the game. We've seen the impact of him not being there last week against Strasbourg when it probably cost him the 3 point eventually to Marseille. So he's been great. I think he's a bit of the tree that hides the forest, because I think if you look at the last few goals that Marseille have scored, it's all free kicks and corners and that fluke of an assist from Pau Lopez that thanks to the defending issues of Reims, Sanchez can take over, but I think he's probably hiding the fact that Marseille is getting some good results and a historical season, their best season in the 21st century, but they are not playing that well since they came back from the World Cup break, and it's great that they can get those points. I think they're going to need a lot more from Sanchez until the end of the season if they want to keep that second spot.
I think what's interesting, Jérémy, is that they've really struggled at home. And yet, that was an 8th successive away win. That's the second best ever record in Ligue, which is jointly held by PSG and Monaco. And only the Marseille team of 2008-2009 actually did better and got 9, which of course Igor Tudor's side are now on course to equal as well. But I mean, again, how do you explain this? That they play away from home. I mean, they went to a Reims side. Reims were unbeaten. In the 17 games that they had under Will Still, they went unbeaten in 19 overall. They'd kept 6 successive clean sheets. And admittedly, Balogun had a good chance early on. He then put Reims ahead. There were some really good saves in there from Paul Lopez as well, notably from a free kick from Alexis Flips, which actually would have been an even better free kick goal than Sanchez's one was. Balogun with a big miss at the end as well, hit the post. Monetsi, just a little side note, he was brilliant yesterday. He was outstanding. He really was. He seems to be playing in a much more advanced role, the Zimbabwean, and he's really, I mean, he's creativity. Look at the assist for the first goal. The little move that he puts on, I think it's Samuel Gigot, absolutely destroys him. It's quite a fabulous performance. But Marseille, as I said, much better on the road. Now, since the Velodrome was renovated ahead of Euro 2016, it's the 3rd time in a season that Marseille are better away from home than at home. So you talked about the warmth of the Velodrome inspiring Alexis Sanchez, but it doesn't seem to inspire his teammates quite as much as admittedly the huge amount of support that they also get on the road. How do you see that, Jérémy?
I think maybe historically is the way the coach have been playing, but I think it applies even more to the way Igor Tudor plays. He likes to press high and then he likes to play direct football. But obviously when teams are going to travel to the Stade Velodrome and coaches are all sort of at pretty similar level and they know what they're doing and they're studying their adversaries, they know that if you start parking the bus against a team like Marseille, who's not very creative this season, if you remove Alexis Sanchez or if you remove maybe Unai, who sometimes when he comes in has a bit of a spark, well, it's easy to just stay around your 30 meters and just wait for them to give you back the ball, because they look a lot like a handball team whenever they have the ball at home. I think it was the same against Sampaoli last year when Sampaoli was making them play. It was about the same thing. It was just a lot of passing and not a lot of actually breaking the lines or going through there or trying to provoke. No one is really doing this. And the players that can do that, they've been pretty poor technically. I think Marseille in recent games, Nuno Tavares loses like over 20, 30 balls every single game. Unfortunately, Jonathan Klaus looks like he's lost his ability to cross the ball, because he was the best right back in the league, and all of a sudden we've seen him missing 2 or 3 opportunities in front of goals, and it looks like his confidence has gone all the way down. So I think that's what we're seeing. And when they play away, especially against teams like Rennes, who's actually a great football team, who's been better than Marseille, I think, yesterday in most of the game, except maybe this half hour after the second goal of Alexis Sanchez, where they looked a bit fearful that every time Marseille is going to attack, they're going to score. When you play against a team that is happy to get out of their own half, then Marseille can actually counter-attack, then they can play the direct football, then they can find Alexis Sanchez behind the defense, and it applies to any of those best teams. We all know that PSG is even better when a team is actually playing football against them, as long as they're not German. So I think that's what happened to Marseille. When Marseille plays at home, the teams know how to play against them. They know that they're going to be pushed at the public, so they try and stay down. And we've seen this season too many times Marseille just finding zero solution when they get into the last 30 meters, besides free kicks, corner kicks, or shot from a distance that are deflected. So to me, that this explains that. I mean, of course, I'm sure that they're trying to find a solution, and maybe, who knows, if one day he plays, he'll be the most expensive player they ever bought, Vitinha.
Yes, he didn't even come off the bench yesterday, Vitinha. And Unai did a little bit towards the end, the two big January moves, of course, for Marseille. Tudor saying in midweek that he was very happy with them. To be honest, he can't really say much else, can he? Because that would be more than implicit criticism of his bosses. Andy, sorry, I jumped in there. You were going to mention something.
No, I was just scratching the back of my neck, and I think you thought I had my hand up. But but there is actually one thing a comment I wanted to make, which was if
don't do that in an auction room. Don't do that in an auction room. That's all I can tell you. You may find it you're going to buy a Monet painting for 15 million.
If you look at the fixture list, I think it's interesting actually, because they're on this fabulous run away from home. The fixtures they have left at home are very favourable indeed. The next one is against Montpellier, who've been on a revival under Michel Derzakarian. If they get through that, they have to play Troyes, Auxerre, Angers and Brest at home in the remaining games. So you look at that and you would say, out of those 5 home games, if they don't take at least 13 points, that's a very, very poor performance. The flip side of that is that the away games they've got left are actually quite tough ones. And I'm not saying they've been on an easy run of games away from home, but they do still have to play Lyon away, Lens away, and Lille away. So at some point, this run of away wins is bound to come to an end. But I think we're at this point now, we say that Marseille look really, really well placed to finish in the top 3. I think it would be a big surprise now if they fell away and failed to do that. And the issue then becomes, can they get automatic Champions League qualification? Will it be third place? I'm leaving aside any suggestion of a title race, because I think Marseille's defeat to PSG at the end of last month put to bed any suggestions of that. But they look really, really well placed to go on and secure top 3, which, you know, in a sense is not guaranteed, because you've got Monaco still on the coattails of both Lens and Marseille. But it would really, I mean, I commentated the Monaco game yesterday, and I have to say it was, I said this to you, and I think it was probably the worst game that I've seen in Ligue 1 this season. It was not a vintage Monaco performance. I think right now Marseille look very good, but I know we brushed over Monaco before. Let's not forget that last season, we're going into the last 10 games of this season. Last season, they won 9 and drew 1 of the last 10 games. So perhaps Monaco will go on a run, and that might put Marseille and Lens under a bit of pressure.
Yeah, just a quick reminder of how the top of the table looks. PSG 66 points, Marseille in second, 7 points back on 59. Lens are just 2 points further back on 57. Monaco, as you said, Andy, hanging on to the coattails on 54, and Rennes on 50. Lille a point further back, just outside the European places as things stand, on 49. Then a bit of a gap back to Nice, Lorient and Reims, who were separated by just a point on 44 and then 43. But PSG, interestingly, the only ones in the top 6 not to win yesterday. But a quick word on Reims. As you mentioned, Jérémy, they were the better side for pretty much the whole game. Monetti hit a post, and really crucially and surprisingly for them, Balogun, who'd already notched a goal in the first half to open the scoring, to move on to 17 for the season, got a glorious chance in the closing stages in added time. Not quite as late as Mohamed Bayo, about 90 plus 3, but when he seemed absolutely destined to score, he just side foots one off the outside of the post, ends up on the turf with his head in his hands. Reims' run of 19 unbeaten games, 17 under Will Still, comes to an end in the league. They had, of course, been beaten in the Coupe de France by Toulouse. But let's just have a quick... They've played some fabulous football, and I'm not worried about them. They're 20 points clear of the relegation zone. That would take something quite remarkable for them to be in anywhere near in trouble. But Balogun, now, I said it in commentary yesterday. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be seeing following Balogun in a Reims shirt, certainly next season. I mean, we could maybe see him in Ligue 1 if somebody like PSG were particularly interested. But, I mean, he looks a very, very, very good young forward. 17 goals, as I mentioned. Apparently in open dialogue with the US men's national team, because he was born in New York City, moved to London and grew up there when he was about 2 years old. I mean, we talked about Alexis Sanchez coming back, but Balogun, Marseille had a lot of success with on loan Arsenal players, but Balogun has come out of nowhere for most of us. He got his first goal actually in the 4-1 defeat to Marseille in Marseille on the first day of the season. But I mean, what have you seen of Balogun this season, Jérémy, and how much have you liked him?
He's been great. I have to say, I wish I had heard your commentary yesterday during the game, because in Australia it was the US team, and without disrespecting our colleagues from the US, I heard a lot of Rem and Cabor and Bailey in the game, which was funny to follow in. I'm sure yours were perfect, Ian. They were talking about Balogun during that game though, and they were saying the same thing, that there is word that maybe he could go to the US national team, and I think either way for him, it's a good call. If he goes to the US, he ends up playing a World Cup at home in a few years. So on the short term, it's good. If he stays with England, and if you stick with England, I think he'll have his shot anyway. As far as the Arsenal team goes, they're pretty stacked up front, and they're doing well under Arteta. So in my opinion, very much what happened to Kalimwendo when he was on loan twice, 2 seasons in a row with Lens. If I was him, and if you're going to make the right choice for your own career, get another loan under your belt before you go back to Arsenal, unless you know that there's a clear path that Gabriel Jesus isn't staying, that Nketiah isn't staying, because right now there's people up front for Arsenal. So a second season at Reims even would be, I think, a great idea for him to stay somewhere where he's already confident, comfortable, where the team knows him, and where he can perform twice in a row and really build that confidence. To me, that's the right move as a footballer. Of course, there are other things to consider, I'm sure, and it's hard to say no to Mikel Arteta if he tells you that he wants you to play for him next year, and that you're here to defend the title that they might win at the end of the season. So in my opinion, both staying in France and playing with the US is probably the right move football-wise. For Balogun, really not. I'm not sure. He's been excellent this season. I think Reims is a really understated team. If anybody had any doubt, seeing them playing against Marseille and winning more duels than Marseille, where Marseille has been so good in the midfield all season, is a real testament to what Will Steele has been doing. And Balogun has been one of those main assets in Will Steele's gameplay. So hopefully he's with us in Ligue 1 for another season, and hopefully we can see him grow a bit more.
Andy, are we looking at a potential new star, or is this another Jordan Siabacha?
No, I think Balogun might well be the real deal. His explosion this season with Reims is pretty remarkable. I think it's even more remarkable than surely what Reims could have expected in their wildest dreams. I mean, last season he scored 3 goals in 20 odd games for Middlesbrough in the Championship in the second tier. So to go from that to this now is really impressive. I think he's got a big career ahead of him. I agree with a lot of what Jérémy's saying. I find it hard to believe, though, that he'll still be at Reims next season. I think that there's probably going to be some other kind of path being devised by Arsenal. I'm not convinced that they'll be saying we're going to have him in the first team next season, but I'm not sure that they might look at maybe somewhere else they can farm him out to for another year and then take it from there. I mean, you could. I don't want to get into talking about Arsenal too much when we have other contributors to this podcast who follow them much more closely than I do, but you could argue that they are looking still for a really prolific goal scorer. I know Gabriel Jesus just had his injury problems, but nobody in that Arsenal team has scored 20 plus goals this season, despite the fact they're flying high at the top of the Premier League. So maybe one day he will be that man. I'm not sure that he is that man just yet, but I mean, I've heard on other platforms people saying that, well, maybe the idea with Balogun will just be to sell him on for huge money at some point. Maybe he will never make the first team there. I don't know. I think Balogun could be the real deal. But I think that his Arsenal career might have to wait a little bit to take off, and I think the chances of seeing him at Reims next season have to be pretty slim because he's done so well. Unfortunately, that's just the way it works, right? If you're at a club like Reims, you do really well, you don't tend to stay for all that long. So, that would be a shame. But for now, they need to enjoy having him because he is a really, really exciting talent.
Well, that segued beautifully into another exciting talent, El Yawahi. Montpellier, as mentioned earlier, Michel Desakarian has worked his magic, which I'm quite surprised by because he doesn't look like the sort of man who does a lot of magic, pulls rabbits out of hats. But he's certainly done so, and returning to Montpellier, 16 points in his last 6 games. They're safe now, surely. Montpellier 2, Clermont 1, El Yawahi 4 goals in his last 3. Montpellier coming from behind to win that one. Now, Wahi, I thought, interestingly, in midweek, saying that probably for him, the move, if it comes in the summer, and it probably almost certainly will, won't it? The step up is going to be most likely in Ligue 1. Andy, you're nodding your head vigorously. Yeah. So either you're making another bid, or or you're actually agreeing with me.
So I didn't actually see him make that comment, I must admit, but I was thinking about Eliawai when I saw that he scored the 2 goals yesterday against Clermont, and I was thinking he's younger than Fuller and Balogun. He's only 20, and I was thinking to myself that it would be, I don't want to say it'd be nice because I think if I were a Montpellier fan, I wouldn't want to see him go, but I think it would be good to see Eliawai make a sort of intermediate step in his career next, whether it be this summer or the next one, rather than being picked up by a really big club where he doesn't play, because that's something that really upsets me when I see, big clubs stockpiling players and not playing them, and I think it can often stunt players' careers. And I think it's very hard for a young player to turn down a move to a really big club if one comes in. So, I was the name that came into my mind just thinking about it was a club like Rennes, right? Rennes have got a reputation for they are a well-off club. They can afford to spend, fees of 20, 25 million, which is probably what it'll take to get Eliawai. The flip side of that is, do they need him? Because they've got Terrier, they've got Guiri, they've got Kalimuendo. But that's the kind of club, the kind of profile I think it would make sense for a player like Eliawai to go to. And obviously, you can cite other examples in Ligue 1 clubs like Lille, for example, who are going to probably sell one of their top players in the summer. So they might be looking for somebody. Your Monacos, you don't know how long Wissam Ben Yedder is going to be there. So there are plenty of options that Wai could go to within Ligue 1, spend a couple of years there, and then if all works out, get a big move to, let's face it, probably England, boring old Premier League. But that is the kind of career path I think it would make sense for a player like Eliawai to take. He's another really exciting talent. And of course, we're used to this in Ligue 1. We're used to really exciting young players coming through, and it's great to see.
Yes, the farmers, the so-called Farmers League seems to be ploughing a rich furrow, shall we say, of youth talent. And surprisingly, given its reputation sometimes outside of these borders, has done so pretty much for the last 30 years and provided, as you mentioned, the boring old Premier League with pretty much every one of their best players.
It's really ironic, right? And I say this as a Scotsman. Say this. I mean, English football can be great and stuff, but I'm sorry, but it's a bit odd, isn't it, that people complain about how rubbish French football is, and then these guys go to England and they all happen to be like the best players. The best players it's not like they come from this league in France and they're really good in France, and then they go to England and they can't handle the step up. I mean, often these guys are the best players in the Premier League. So I find it really strange. I find it really strange. But yeah, the level of football in France is pretty high. Let's put it that way, and that is borne out when you see what these guys do when they go abroad.
Well, having said that, we've only got one European representative still in the competition, and
Ian, sorry to interrupt you. That's a different question. That's not about.
Sorry, I was just trying to seg, Andy. I wasn't raising an issue there. I was just moving.
But that is something that's often used as a stick to beat French football with, right? But just because you don't get results in Europe does not mean that you're not good enough. There are lots of other things that come into play there, and I think again that's an interesting discussion.
Well, thanks, Andy, for ruining my almost perfect segue into Nice's 1-1 draw with Lorient. Nice unbeaten now in 10, but it took a fine goal from Gaëtan Laborde to rescue a point at the Allianz Riviera. 3 draws on the bounce. Looks like that Nice's dreams of European football next season may be fading just a little bit. Lyon's only route into Europe next season will be the Coupe de France. They have to win it, and to do so, they're going to have to beat Nantes away in the semi-finals. They played them at the Groupama, so at home, at the weekend, a 1-1 draw, which I wouldn't mind a 1-1 draw in the Coupe de France semi-final. I'm going to commentate that game. It is going to be pretty cold, but we don't have extra time, so we'd go straight to a penalty shootout, so that would be actually quite nice. And I have great memories of Nantes' win over Monaco in last season's, I think it was semi-final. It was a fabulous evening. But Alexandre Lacazette, talking of Arsenal strikers, 17 goals for Lyon this season, level with Following Balogun, actually. It was his 150th goal for the club. He's now the outright second top scorer in club history. Who's the top scorer? Is that Fleury de Nalo? Gold? Great name. What a name. Troyes, still in trouble. Patrick Kisnorbo, after that, 4 points from his first couple of games, struggling. But they would have had 3 points. Late equaliser from Roman Del Castillo, who's got one of the best names in world football for my money, from the penalty spot for Brest. A point that keeps Brest out of the bottom 4. Troyes still very much in it, but still very much also in the race to keep themselves out of that ultimate drop at the end of the season. So we talked about the top of the table. Marseille, they were in third place at kickoff on Sunday, and that's because on Saturday, Lens had played at home to Angers. Callum Brown saw this one.
Poor from Angers. Give that straight to Loïs Openda. Openda strike. Early opportunity for Lens, the Belgian. On a high still after his fine 5-minute spell behind by Paul Bernardoni. Abdul Samad again. Ball in behind for Seko Fofana. There's the opener for Lens. It has been coming. And it's captain fantastic. His 4th of the season. And Lens take a deserved lead. A great run from the Ivorian. He slots it beyond Paul Bernardoni. Salis Abdel Samed, he picks out his central midfield partner, and having been denied by Bernardoni only a few minutes ago, captain smashes that into the far corner beyond the goalkeeper, and Lens have the lead. Thomason running the ball high up the pitch. He finds Loïs Openda. Chance for 2. Openda. It is 2. Back to business for the Belgian. A hat-trick last weekend. It's taken him just half an hour to get his first tonight. Poor from Angers, masters of their own downfall. Quite like Clermont last weekend against Lens, but it's a lovely turn, isn't it, from Loïs Openda. It's a fantastic finish. Slots it beyond Bernardoni, and they have the 2-goal cushion. Lens' best defence against Ligue 1's worst. Lovely move to start this second half, and Openda's in behind. Chance for a third. It is 27 seconds after the restart, and Loïs Openda, his 5th goal in 2 games. That's a great ball from the central defender Jonathan Grady, and Openda in behind Camara. He had him for pace. It's another finish on his left foot beyond Bernardoni. The second half is barely kicked off. Lens make it 3-0. Openda. Also Openda wide for Sotoka. Back to Openda. Denied a hat-trick. What a stop it is from Bernardoni. It's a terrific ball. It's a great save as well. Equal to it. So close to a hat-trick. That would have made it back-to-back hat-tricks.
So Loïs Openda, after his hat-trick in about 5 minutes the previous week, gets a couple as well. Seko Fofana on target too. Talking of fine up-and-coming strikers, Loïs Openda I mean, again, the scouting of Lens, that is sensational work. It really is. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Lens. And you mentioned about Marseille being in a good position, Andy, to finish in the top 3. Lens, obviously in a good position. They're in 3rd. But are they going to do it? Are we going to see Lens in the Champions League next season? And when I say that, I almost get goosebumps at the prospect of that stadium on a Champions League night must be, I would like to use an expletive, but I won't, mental. Are they going to do it, Andy?
Well, I think that certainly the form they've been in would suggest, why not? They've looked on course for a top 3 finish pretty much all season long. They are very, very strong at home, and the atmosphere certainly, you could argue that the atmosphere at the Velodrome sometimes works against Marseille, but the atmosphere at the Bollard seems to help Lens enormously. They've got some difficult games still to come. They've still got to go to Paris. They've still got to play Marseille, I believe. I think they might still have to play Monaco too. So huge games in which their final position will be determined in. I think it would be fabulous to see. I mean, obviously Monaco have finished in 3rd place in the last couple of years and fallen short of the group stage. One level you could say from a neutral perspective, it'd be nice to see somebody else get in there. The other viewpoint would be that despite what Monaco have done in the last couple of seasons, they're more likely to be in a position in terms of the strength of their squad to come through the qualifying rounds in the Champions League. Now, that might sound odd given that they've failed to do it in the last 2 years, but you tend to think that Monaco going into a season would stand a better chance of making the group stage from the qualifying rounds. That might be tricky for Lens. And from a French viewpoint, obviously, we need to have every club possible in the Champions League group stage. So maybe that's a different argument, because everything would suggest that what Lens have done in recent years would suggest that they'd be quite capable of building a team, strengthening the squad in the right places, keeping the right players, and knowing that if they move somebody on, they have a replacement lined up. Maybe they can have a strong enough team in place. But then again, we're coming to a point now where they lost the sporting director, Florent Gisolfi, who has built the team over the last few years. He left for Nice back in the early months of the season. So it's a new recruitment team who are working on new signings now. So, if they finish 3rd and the new recruitment team is having to target the right players to make them capable of reaching the Champions League group stage, that's going to be a big ask for them. In a way, that's a different discussion. Right now, they look like a pretty good bet to finish in the top 3. But as I said, they've got these really big games to come. I mean, we're just heading into this international break now. The chance for a team like Lens to regroup and re-energize for the final couple of months of the season, and that's when we head into the big period of the campaign where the pressure is on and the fight for European places is going to be really interesting. But look, it looks like Lens are going to be in European competition of some sort, and I think their fans will be quite happy with a Europa League place, even a Europa Conference League place. I think that they would just be delighted to be in Europe, and I think it would be great for fans around Europe to see a huge European night in that stadium, because the atmosphere is really, really something else.
Jérémy, you're a little bit biased as a Marseille fan, and as we're looking at you on this call, there's a picture of the Stade Velodrome behind you, and I believe it's the 1993 celebrations after that inaugural Champions League win. But can Lens actually overhaul Marseille?
Yeah,
and finish in second? I mean, the crucial game, obviously, it's looking to be that week 34 game, and it's in Lens. Marseille, as we said, been fantastic away from home, but going to Lens, that is not an easy trip, and not an easy trip at all.
Yeah, it's not an easy trip, and sort of like good fans to another. We know how amazing Lens fans have been, and I think they've always been respect between the two clubs for both revendicating that they are the best fan base in France and respecting each other for that, Marseille and Lens. I think to end this point, the schedule for Lens is probably the tricky there. Paris and Marseille, out of their last 10 games, I think they play against 7 teams that are between 12th and 20th in the table, whether Lens is playing Reims, Paris, Monaco, Toulouse, Marseille, and then they're finishing against Ajaccio and Auxerre, who by then will probably be fighting for survival in Ligue 1. So it's not an easy schedule, I think, for Lens, and that's where we're going to see what they're really made of. They've hit a bit of a slump in the past couple of months. Again, to Andy's point, losing Gisolfi, we went from seeing players coming from the MLS and the Eredivisie to a winter transfer window where Thomasson and Fulgini arrive, which are doing good for Lens, but it's, I guess, less exotic and less discovering a talent. It's two players who have done well in Ligue 1 and who are now doing okay at Lens. So it's going to be about, can they do it? Can they get the same performance that they were having at the beginning of the season against bigger teams? Because they haven't been able to do that in 2023. So Franck Hez is facing a challenge there. It's been 2 years now that we feel bad that they failed just before the European Conference League spot. This year, they seem that they will have it. I think you almost want them to finish fourth rather than third, so they have a real shot at getting ready for the Europa League and at actually shining in the European spot, because we know how great they can be at home. Stade Bollaert is amazing in Ligue 1. He'll be bursting with candor and with energy and atmosphere in Champions League or in Europa League even. So I'm looking forward to see them playing in Europe next year, because I'm not doubting they're going to make it. I think it's a hard 10 games that they have between now and the end of the season, and I don't know if they have the depth to be able to make it.
I'd just like to point out as well a really nice touch on Saturday. The Lens players wearing their usual numbers, but the names on the back were the names of their teammates, which was, so you had Florian Satoka wearing Samba on his back. Seko Fofana had Jean-Louis Lecker's name on the back, which I like. The backup goalkeeper is a bit of a character, shall we say? And again, maybe. Yeah, exactly. He scored. Maybe this is what PSG were thinking. I don't know. When they have the two goalkeepers on the bench again.
That would have been a nightmare for a commentator who hadn't done his research.
I was just wondering what the US, our US colleagues would have made of that. That would have been very interesting. But it was a nice touch, and I think an important message as well about anti-discrimination, saying no to racism, and Lens again deserve a huge amount of credit for not only the way that they played on the pitch this season, but how they handle things off it. It's a really class move. You're listening to Le Beau Jeu, the official Ligue 1 podcast in English. You can catch us on Twitter, of course, at Ligue 1 World or at Ligue1_ENG. And please do like us, recommend us, subscribe, follow us on all the usual podcast platforms. It's time now for our Deja Who quiz. It means that you can win a very, very fine Ligue 1 Uber Eats team shirt every single month. But to do so, you've got to be an absolute genius. I mean, you've got to answer all the 4 questions in the month and get the special link as well between the players to have a chance of winning. You need to email your answers in, because we like to do things a little bit old school on Le Beau Jeu. That's to ligue1podcast@gmail.com. So the question today is, who am I? I began and ended my career in France, but spent just 5 seasons in the top flight. My reputation and trophy cabinet was built during a successful 13 seasons overseas. Throughout my career, I played with Gerald Vandenberg and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Walter Samuel and Samuel Gigot, Olivier Dacour and Patrick Vieira, John Carew and Adrien Mutu, Adrien Rabiot and Serge Aurier. Who am I, and what do I have in common with March's other candidates? Andy just raised his arm and touched his ear. He clearly knows the answer. Who is it, Andy? And I'm sorry, he's making yet another bid in the auction. If you think you know who it is, because Andy has absolutely no clue, I'm pretty sure of that, send your answers via email to ligue1podcast@gmail.com. Jérémy, you're far more intellectual than me and Andy. Any ideas?
Who is Gerald Vandenberg?
That's, yeah, actually, the clue was not in the answer. The answer was not in the clue. It's not Gerald Vandenberg, actually. But yes, look, you can Google that one, children.
Played in France.
So it's the Gerald Vandenberg played in France. Don't, Andy, come on, stop Googling. You didn't know that.
No, I looked him up.
I seem to remember him from the. Am I right? Then could he have even played in the Euro? Winning squad of 1988?
Yes,
not with Zlatan.
Yes.
Oh, did he? Wow. Okay, I'm surprised. Anyway, with Jan Wouters and the people like this, Hans van Breukelen, who I interviewed once, that was a really good interview. Anyway, I digress, as usual. It's the international break. A little time for us to put our feet up and have a little breather, just the same as for some of the footballers, although Marseille have 16 players away on international duty, so they are going to be busy. PSG will have a similar amount, no doubt. And then they'll all come back, hopefully fresh and firing, for round 29 of the Ligue 1 Uber Eats season. It's time for us to take a little trip into the future and have a little bon voyage. So, gentlemen, some of the ties of round 29. Jérémy, Marseille against Montpellier, we've mentioned already. That's a huge one at the bottom of the table at the Stade de l'Abbé Deschamps. Auxerre against Troyes. Rennes against Lens. That's always a good game, and always a brilliant atmosphere as well, it has to be said, at Roazhon Park. And here we go. Weekly mention for, I don't even need to say it anymore, do I? Lille, Lorient, Angers, Nice, Brest, Toulouse, Clermont, Ajaccio, Nantes, Reims, or Reims, if you prefer, Monaco, Strasbourg, or Strasbourg, as we might prefer, Jérémy, and Paris Saint-Germain against Olympique Lyonnais. Gentlemen, where do we fancy?
Well, I would choose Brittany. I would choose Rennes against Lens for all that we talked about. I think that's a huge game in the European race. Rennes very, very good at home. Lens, it's the start of this really difficult run of games that they have going into the end of the season, and we'll see their top three credentials. So that's going to be a terrific game. And as we've talked about before, and as I think you were referring to, Ian, there are certain culinary delights in Rennes which are always worth sampling, and Rennes in general is a lovely city for a weekend. So, a 9 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday makes it perfect. You can head there early in the day, have a nice lunch, as you and I have done before, Ian, in Rennes, and then you can stay the night and have a lazy morning on the Sunday as well. So I would strongly recommend a trip to Rennes for that one. I
couldn't tell. Which culinary delights are you talking about? You're talking about those half-time galette saucisses. Quite right. But it is. I can tell you as well, if you do go to Rennes, and in all seriousness, okay, try the galette saucisse, that's also serious, but you can have a lovely walk from the town centre to the stadium, along the river. Yeah. It's fantastic. It's probably my favourite match to go to, a Rennes game, because the atmosphere is great. The walk from the city centre there and back, it's not very long, maybe 20 minutes or so. It's absolutely fabulous. There's a beautiful a lock with a little house there. The lockkeeper's old house, obviously. The stadium in the background. It's delightful. Jérémy, where do you fancy?
You talk about food. I like beverages, so I'll probably go and see Auxerre and Troyes playing around that Champagne area over there. A nice little derby of the southeast of Paris. I think it'll be an interesting game. Mind you, Angie earlier said that game between Monaco and Ajaccio was one of the worst one you've seen. I think Auxerre and Troyes is going to have quite a few, unfortunately for them, defensive mistakes in them, but it'll make the game interesting, and it is a relegation battle and a derby, so always a good game between those two teams.
Yeah, you have to. You also at the Parc des Princes. Lyon have also had a little bit of a hoodoo over Paris Saint-Germain, and we know that they are the let's perform against the big boys team par excellence. And just imagine, and sorry, Robbie Thompson could just block your ears right now, but imagine a second successive home defeat for Paris Saint-Germain, albeit separated by an international break. That would, Le Chat would be very much among the pigeons. Should that happen. Anyway, let's see how those matches pan out after what should be a very interesting international window. I'm sure Andy is going to be busy. Jérémy will be watching Les Bleus if he can work out what time zone they're actually playing in, because Jérémy's joining us from Australia. All that's left for me to say is thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again after the international break. Au revoir and à bientôt.
Bye bye.